Good evening. Thank you for coming out tonight. My name is Yvette Moy, and I'm the University of Washington's Director of Public Lectures. And we are housed in the Graduate School, and it's so nice to see you all out on a Tuesday evening. I've been told it's the 7th worst day of the week, so I'm really glad that you're here with us. Tonight, we're going to welcome the University of Washington Professor of Linguistics, Dr. Emily Bender, along with the Director of Research for the Distributed AI Research Institute, Dr. Alex Hanna, and moderator and journalist Austin Jenkins for a conversation titled The AI Con: How to Fight Big Tech's Hype and Create the Future We Want. Before we get started, I have a few announcements, and I'd like to start with a thank you. First of all, I want to thank all of you. You had to come through and do a little security check. I really want to thank you for being patient with us as we navigate these new times. So thank you for that. I also want to thank our friends in the University of Washington Department of Communications and the Com Lead program, in particular Ekin Yazin, who will be up on stage in a few minutes, who planted the seed to do this additional lecture. So we're really grateful for that. And we love doing the extra work for you, Ekin. And then for housekeeping items, if you haven't done so already, please take your cell phones out and silence them or put them in airplane mode. We ask you to refrain from taking any video or audio recordings of this evening's lecture. It is being live streamed and recorded. Hello, friends in the live stream world. And you can find the video on the Office of Public Lectures YouTube channel. We also ask that you refrain from taking photographs while our speakers are on stage. It's really distracting and hard for them to focus. And then tonight, we have two ways that you can ask questions. If you are in the room with us this evening and you feel brave, you can come to the microphone here, stage right, and we ask that you ask a question that's related to the topic at hand in the form of a question. Novel, I know. So we're going to hold you to it. And for those of you who feel a little shy, or our friends out in the live stream world, you can email a question in via our Slido. There's a QR code here, stage left. You should have gotten one as well on your confirmation. And you can send a question in, and you can also upvote, which is pretty exciting, which we kind of like. And then finally, this evening, we do have a book signing. Our friends at Elliott Bay, here stage right, are selling copies of the book. And we also have book plates if you had forgotten your book. So we are happy to accommodate that. And with that, I'm going to welcome the University of Washington's Director of Communication Leadership Program, as well as the chair of my office, the Office of Public Lectures, Dr. Ekin Yazin, to the stage. And as Dr. Yazin is making her way to the stage, I'm going to ask each of you to take a moment that are in the room with us and introduce yourself to the neighbor sitting next to you. Make a friend tonight. Thank you.
I hope people have been able to quickly say hi to their neighbors. Again, I want to thank Yvette and also Office of the Public Lectures for putting together such a robust program. I am now the current chair of the selection committee that consists of department and different faculty at the university. And for all of us, it's such a joy to see such a vibrant group of thinkers and ideas that connect with public through the work of this amazing committee. So with that, I want to introduce you to today's speakers, and please bear with me as they're extremely accomplished. So I'm going to try to do justice to all their long-term work and introduce them. First, but not last, Dr. Emily M. Bender is a professor of linguistics and an adjunct professor in both the School of Computer Science and the Information School at the University of Washington, where she's been a faculty member since 2003. Her research spans multilingual grammar engineering, computational semantics, and the societal impacts of language technology. She has co-authored several influential books, most recently the one that we'll discuss today, She co-authored the book, The AI Con, How to Fight Big Tech's Hype and Create the Future We Want, with sociologist Dr. Alex Hanna, who's also joining us, critically examining the narratives surrounding artificial intelligence. Through her public scholarship, Dr. Bender applies linguistic expertise to expose the misconceptions about AI, helping audiences better understand the actual capabilities of these technologies. She has received many accolades and awards, including her 2022 election as a Fellow of the American Association for the Advancement of Science. And in 2023, Dr. Bender was included in the inaugural Time 100 AI list, highlighting individuals shaping conversations about AI's impact on the world. Dr. Alex Hanna is the Director of Research at the Distributed AI Research Institute, or DARE, and a sociologist whose work explores the data behind computational technologies and its role in deepening racial, gender, and class inequalities. She also studies social movements, focusing on anti-racist campus protests in the US and Canada. Dr. Hanna holds degrees in computer science, mathematics, and sociology from Purdue University, and earned her MS and PhD in sociology from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Alongside linguistic Emily M. Bender, she co-hosts the amazing Mystery AI Hype Theater 3000, a lively, inclusive series on Twitch and podcast platforms that deconstructs AI industry narratives. Dr. Hanna's research has been published in top-tier social science journals, including Mobilization, American Behavioral Scientist, and Big Data and Society, as well as leading computer science conferences. She serves as a senior fellow at the Center for Applied Transgender Studies and is an advisory board member for the Human Rights Data Analysis Group. Recognized for her contributions, Dr. Hanna has received the Wisconsin Alumni Association's Forward Award, been named to Fast Company's Queer 50 list, and featured on Business Insider's AI Power list. She was also highlighted in the Cal Academy of Sciences New Science exhibit, which celebrates queer and trans scientists of color. Our moderator tonight is Austin Jenkins. Austin Jenkins is a staff writer for Pluribus News, a digital news site focused on emerging policy trends in states and state legislators. In that role, Austin covers tech policy, including the myriad ways state lawmakers and governors are promoting, regulating, and legislating artificial intelligence. Austin is also the longtime host of Inside Olympia on TVW, Washington State's C-SPAN network. Previously, Austin spent nearly 2 decades covering the Washington State legislature and state politics for the region's NPR stations. Prior to that, Austin worked as a television news reporter. He earned his BA in government from Connecticut College and in his master in communication from the Communication Leadership Program, for which I'm a director at the University of Washington. So with that, please welcome tonight's guests to the stage.
Thank you, Akin, for the very nice introduction. It's great to be here. Hello to the in-person audience. Hello to the online live stream audience. Great turnout for a Tuesday night for a really important topic. And I want to say right off the top that I am prepared to have the premise of my questions regularly challenged during this conversation. So I'm prepared, now you're prepared for this. I do want to, just as a sort of point of personal privilege, mention a couple of things. The framing that I'm coming at this conversation from is the fact that, as Akin said, I cover AI policy making that's happening in states and state legislatures, and frankly, that's where all of the action is. Congress hasn't done anything. And so I've got a lot of questions I'm curious about because I'm seeing how legislators are thinking deeply about this topic. They're also acting with some urgency. They're getting a ton of pushback from industry and from the venture capital world that doesn't want regulation, and now the new presidential administration is sort of amplifying that. There's talk about competition with China. I mean, on and on and on. I think that tonight's conversation is going to sort of force me to really perhaps start to rethink the reality that seems to be in place in our lives right now around this technology, and certainly in the policymaking setting. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. And we all are experiencing this technology in sort of personal ways, and that's where your questions in a little bit are going to come in, because I'm going to miss some things. Fun fact, I just got to mention this. Dr. Bender and I actually went to a couple of years of elementary school together. So this is a full, and I'm not kidding. Her parents are in the front row here. That's a whole other story. But this is a full circle moment, and it's really special to be on stage with you. Very nice to get to meet you for the first time, and congratulations on the book. It really got me thinking. I think we also need to just set the stage, and then I'm going to let them talk. I have some polling here. A recent Reuters Ipsos poll found that 47% of Americans think that AI is bad for humanity. 58% think it could risk the future of humankind. And 71% fear it will put too many people out of work permanently. Here is a quote from the book that I think captures maybe the essence of where these authors are coming from. The more we can pierce the bubble that Sam Altman, the OpenAI CEO, and his kind live in, the better we can upset the idea that the encroaching of these systems into every area of life is inevitable. So that's where I want to start. The American public, probably the world, is aware of AI and is thinking about what it means to our very existence and our jobs. And here you both are saying, hold on a second. Don't necessarily believe the hype. So I think my first question, and I'll start with you, Emily, is how should we think of the two of you? Are you tech ethicists? Are you myth busters, hype busters? What are you? Who are you?
Well, that's an excellent first question, but I'm going to do one thing first, which is to say you are absolutely right that it's the whole world. I just got back from a trip to Dharamsala in northern India, where I was talking with people through the Mind and Life Institute, including Tibetan Buddhist monastics, and many of them were worried about, what does this mean for us? So it really is, the hype has reached, I think, every corner of the world. And it was wonderful to be there, and I was a little bit sad to see the hype had gotten there too. In terms of who are we, we're technologists, right? We have training in technology, we use many kinds of technology, but we are very much, I think, interested in trying to combat the harms that are being done in the name of this technology and clawing back some of the power that is being appropriated under this guise of inevitability.
How would you answer that same question, Alex? And maybe to sort of add on to that, what is the premise here of this book, or the thesis?
So first off, Emily buried a lead because she also got to meet the Dalai Lama. And so that was cool. I was a little jealous. But
did they talk about AI?
Did they talked about AI? Didn't they?
Not with His Holiness.
No, not with His Holiness. Right. Okay. Yeah. So the premise of the book is that first, one of the premises, and I'm not gonna steal Emily's thunder because I think she does a really good job explaining this. But first, thinking about AI, AI is not a thing, so it's not a singular thing. There's a bunch of technologies that got looped into what is called AI. Now, so building on that, we talk about what tech hype is, and then furthermore, what AI hype is. And so hype is kind of the aggrandizement of some product that you, the consumer or the manager or the worker, have to use lest you be left in the dust. And AI hype is specifically around a certain set of technologies. And in this case, they are a body of technologies that we focus on mostly in the book, which are chatbots or large language models, or as we like to call in the book, synthetic text extruding machines. Now, we use this to be a little more clear on what these things are doing, specifically taking a bunch of training data, jumbling it up, developing probabilistic modeling, and then extruding them in something that seems coherent but does not have any access to understanding, or truth claims, or the like. And so the claim of the book is AI is a bunch of hype, it's a marketing term, and we need to be wary about how it's affecting us in many different registers, in the workplace, in social services, in creativity, in the environment, and you, the consumer, the citizen, can do something about it.
And language does matter. So, Emily, I'm going to give you a chance to explain and you're not going to be able to change me in 1 hour tonight, but if you were to try to disabuse me of using this term, artificial intelligence, as the sort of default, why should I not be using it? Why should we not be using it?
So artificial intelligence, as Alex has said, is a marketing term, and it doesn't refer to a coherent set of technologies. So when you refer to AI as if it were a thing, and there's a wonderful paper by Dr. Lucy Suchman about the uncontroversial thingness of AI, and there she's actually calling to task the critics of this technology, who in their criticism still refer to it as if it were a thing. So we don't want to, in our speaking about it, sort of add to the idea that there's a thing out there called artificial intelligence. So it's not one thing. We don't want to sort of reinforce its existence. There's several other problems, though. So one thing is the term intelligence itself suggests way more functionality than is actually there, and also ties into eugenicist histories of measuring intelligence. There's that set of problems. There's also the fact that when we lump together ChatGPT and the image production machines like DALL-E and Midjourney and self-driving cars and automated decision systems and, hey, why not, spell check, right? And the systems that play Go and play chess, and we say all of that is one thing, then we are more likely to believe that it can probably do anything else, because that's a very diverse set of things that are happening. But in fact, those are separate systems. It's not one thing.
Okay, so they're separate systems. That term is beyond generic. It's perhaps inaccurate, and yet it's what we're using. I want to ask about the other word that is used here, though, and that is the con, or the concept of hype. It feels like the genie's out of the bottle, that automated decision-making systems have been in place for, I think, decades now, that these chatbots that we're interacting with more and more are sort of newer on the scene, but the large language models behind them are not so new. And there are companies now, OpenAI, I think, is the most valued privately held company at this point, having eclipsed now SpaceX. Venture capital firms are making big bets on this in 10-year fund cycles. So what part of this is hype or con, because it feels like the train has left the station and is speeding on the tracks very quickly?
Yeah, so I'm going to do the first premise switcheroo a little bit and say that, so chatbots are actually quite old. So I mean, and we talk about in the book about the Eliza chatbot that Joseph Weizenbaum developed in the 60s.
This was a mental health chatbot, right?
Well, it was an example that it was a program called Doctor, and amongst the set of routines there was a routine called Eliza, and it was not intended to be a mental health chatbot. It was intended to simulate a Rogerian psychoanalyst, and it was done so because it was easy enough to replicate some of that via a rule framework. So you mentioned something about a family member, and it says, "Tell me about your mother," or it says, "There's conflict between blah and myself," and it says, "Oh, you mentioned this person and then yourself. Let's press on that." And so it was.
It's a little like the Freud I have on my desk, where I push the button and I get the answer to the question that I'm.
The Freud?
Yeah, the Freud.
You have a Freud on your desk.
I do.
Incredible. But these large language models are the thing that are new on the block, and this starts in 2018, I suppose, with the All You Need Is Attention paper that comes out of Google, and this development of the transformer model, and the way that they can be scaled up with larger and larger training data sets, right? And so it feels as though the train has left the station because, this has been constructed. And I mean, I think there's a lot of desire to think that these technologies are more than what they are. One of them has to do with how we interpret language, and I'm going to hold that for Emily because she can explain that much better than I can because she's a linguist. But as a sociologist, the thing that I'm really interested in is thinking about, well, where are the markets moving and who is following what, and what is the problem that's being attempted to be solved? And the problem that's attempted to be solved is wages. It is labor replacement. It's the idea that you can replace so many different activities that are done by humans with automation. And this isn't a new thing. I mean, automation itself is a word that gets coined in the mid-century by a Ford manager or Ford executive, and is describing the different kinds of processes that are being replaced when it's replacing human labor. And the thing that I think is the misconception is that there are kind of elements of human labor that can be replaced whole cloth, as if human discernment or empathy or connection can actually be replaced. And yet that's the big promise, because if you're replacing human labor with that much automation and that much control, then you don't have workers that can push back or need to eat or need benefits. And so that kind of technology is very, very attractive, and I think that's why it's garnered so much investment.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so just to build on that, and to get to the thing that Alex keeps teasing, if you thought there was a company that was on the verge of making a system that could do everything a person can do, you would be crazy not to bet the farm on that, right? Because that would be effectively infinitely profitable. Why do people believe that, though? They believe that because of the experience of chatbots. And this is the thing where the linguistics is really crucial. So a chatbot is a conversation simulator. It's built on these large language models, and as Alex mentioned, in 2017, 2018, the technology there got better. But what that technology is for modeling the distribution of word forms in texts. Which bits of spellings of words happen to go next to each other? And what OpenAI did was they took this stuff that was really being developed for things like automatic transcription. We've got a sound wave, there's a bunch of different actual sequences of words that might have corresponded to, which one looks like it's more like what's in the training data. That's a sensible use of language modeling. OpenAI starts doing this thing where they run that to, instead of answer the question, okay, which of these strings that we got out of the acoustic model from the automatic transcription system looks more plausible, to repeatedly answering the question, what's the likely next word? And if you answer that question over and over again, you get synthetic text. And if you do it in the context of legal documents, you get something that looks like a legal document. And if you do it in the context of a therapeutic conversation, you get something that looks like a therapeutic conversation. But it's not any of those. But the reason people are so taken in has to do with how we understand language. So you might think that when you understand something that somebody said or wrote, what happened is they had an idea, they packed it into the words, you received the words, reading them or hearing them, and unpacked the idea. That's actually not what happens. What we learn from psycholinguistics and pragmatics is what we're doing is keeping in mind everything we know or believe about the other person's knowledge and beliefs in general, about their common ground with us, and with what they imagine their audience to know and believe, which is another way of saying common ground. And then against that background, we are answering the question, what must they have been trying to convey by choosing those words in that order? And importantly, when we're doing that, we are imagining a mind behind the text. And so every time we see the output of something like ChatGPT, and we reflexively do this to make sense of it, we are projecting a mind there. And so it's very easy for the venture capitalists and the tech executives and everybody else to think, hey, we've got a thinking machine here. And hey, it's fluent. And hey, it doesn't make any grammatical errors. It must be really smart.
So if we now know it's not really a human in that black box, and that the magic is maybe not that magical, and yet a lot of us are using it and finding it helpful. And then we're hearing things like the next thing coming is artificial general intelligence and agentic AI. So when you read those headlines, and when you perhaps experiment with these chatbots, and knowing that many of us are we supposed to just close our computers and never go to OpenAI or to ChatGPT again? Do you just want us to use it, but use it wisely? How are we supposed to be thinking about this?
Right. So, so there's a few things behind this, right? And so it's interesting, too, in thinking about how we use these tools and how we interact with these technologies. And I don't want to try to presume to know all the different cases, because there's many different cases that we hear of. So a few of the different ways we think about it is how we think about synthetic text and what synthetic text is. So synthetic text that is generated by these models there's no guarantee to necessarily having any kind of access to a truth or a true kind of data set. And a good example of this is several tools that have come out around the use of these tools for scientific discovery. So in the book, we've got this example of this thing released by Meta, which is called Galactica. And Galactica was parroted, not parroted, but it was advertised by their chief AI scientist, Yann LeCun. And Yann LeCun is this person who is kind of a big deal in AI. In 2018, he shared a major computer science award with Geoffrey Hinton and Yoshua Bengio called the Turing Award. And so LeCun releases Galactica, and his team releases Galactica, and they say this is better than the other large language models because it's trained only on scientific material. And so people prompt it. It basically starts repeating kind of common myths, racist myths in science. It starts, and it's barred from saying anything about queerness or transgender issues. It doesn't even, I think it even was barred from even discussing anything related to AIDS. And so, and a whole a host of issues. So one of the things about this is veracity and what is actually outputted by synthetic text extrusion machines is that there's no access to kind of a truth. If there is a truth that is output by these models, it is happenstance. It is because there was something in their training data, and it's probabilistically output. And so I think there's often cases in which people are using these models. They're saying, well, let me write a program with this, and then in a programming language. And if it runs, sure, it runs. And then I can go on with my day, and it'll be fine. And for small common problems, maybe that's okay because those are idioms that are produced often. In coding scenarios in which you have to deal with someone else's code, in which someone has to read your code after, which are the vast majority of cases, that's not actually going to be helpful because if you can't necessarily explain it, then how is someone else supposed to suss that out? And so a lot of the ways in which these things are used, they're to be used in a community of practice. And if you're doing that without really understanding the process or passing those processes on to other people, then it's really missing out, one, your own understanding, but also how a community of practice is doing that work and engaging in the process.
Well, I want to follow up with sort of the same concept here. How should we mere mortals be approaching this technology? Do we, again, close the chatbot and never explore and experiment with it again? Or do we just need to be smart consumers about how we do it?
So my advice is don't use them for several reasons. One is, first of all, they are environmentally ruinous. And every time we go to one of these systems and use it, we are helping to build the case for the training of the next model. And Alex was just pointing me to a link showing that actually OpenAI now is going to continuous training. So they're always doing this, and it is actually really bad for the environment. Every time we motivate the training of the next model, we're building the next data center, and we don't want to do that. But also, every time you turn to ChatGPT, there's an opportunity cost, right? What might you have done instead? Or every time you are satisfied with the so-called AI overview in your Google search result, there's the opportunity cost of what you might have done instead. And that might have been turning to someone a friend, family member, someone else in your community, and having one of the interactions that actually is what communities are built out of. It might have been exploring the links yourselves and building up your sense of the information ecosystem and what different sources are and how they speak to each other. It might have been thinking through the problem and understanding it better. And it's an interesting moment we're in right now, because on the one hand, it is very hard to avoid this stuff. You said both close the chatbot and close the computer. And it's true that that little sparkle emoji is everywhere, right? You get the unasked for AI overviews out of Google. You get Zoom AI Companion. Adobe Acrobat, when I open up one of my students' pieces of writing that I am going to be giving feedback on, asks me if I want a summary of it. No, that's not what I'm doing.
So,
right?
so you might have to close the computer to escape this.
Yeah, it is really hard to avoid. But just 3 years ago, this wasn't everywhere. And we are in a much better position now to sort of remember the muscle memory of how we used to do these things and avoid it. And part of the reason that it's everywhere is that there is all of that VC money you talked about. There is so much investment in this that they have to make us feel like we have to use it, but we don't.
And just adding to that, because a lot of the reason that those things pop up, this is what we would call in user experience a dark pattern, effectively things that are put into an interface that makes it very hard to avoid. And so you've probably seen this with, you have all the cookie pop-ups that'll happen, and those are there because of GDPR compliance. So they said, well, let's just do it for everybody. And so, but then they make the X this small on the screen. And so those kinds of dark patterns are very prevalent, especially with these AI pop-ups. I think I saw some recent research at a computer science conference on this, highlighting the kind of prevalence of dark patterns. And that's because a lot of people don't want to use them. I mean, there's the cases of people that are using them. In the book, we talk about a few different things about why you shouldn't use them. So there's a kind of elements of process and the kind of elements of, to do this, as Emily was saying, the opportunity cost of being in relation with somebody. But I also think there's those elements of doing that process of doing the writing or doing the research or doing the kind of information literacy that one needs to do to get to a particular place. So I think those are very, very helpful to consider. And also the fact that because so many people aren't really using them, we're seeing that kind of prevalence of those dark patterns because they want the investment to pay off.
So I asked you about personal use. Let me step back a little bit and ask about the potential for AI to help revolutionize certain sectors of the economy or certain areas of practice. And let's take healthcare as an example. I had a friend who recently wrote on Facebook that about being really proud of a journey that has taken me to a company that's developing AI technologies that may help detect breast cancer sooner, and sort of touting the ability to fuse science and technology to detect sooner. We hear about radiologists maybe being assisted by AI to see tumors that might have been missed by the human eye or just missed by human error. Isn't there potential like this to partner with AI?
Why are you calling it AI?
Yeah, because it's going to take me a really long time to partner with technology that augments or assists me and helps. And the driving example is given too. Humans make mistakes. What if computer technology could help us work against that, partner with us?
So there are certainly use cases for automatic pattern recognition and image processing. I am not an expert in radiology, but it seems plausible to me that you could design systems that assist in, I don't want to use assist, it's too anthropomorphizing, tools for radiologists to use that might highlight areas of the scan to focus in on more. For example, though there was a recent study that showed that radiologists who use one of these tools had their skills atrophy in the process of using the tools. So I think that it's more than just designing a system that gets whatever % accuracy on finding the things that the previous radiologists had found, but actually doing the situated experimental work of what happens when a person is using this. So, but sure, I mean, if you want to talk about radiology, the very imaging systems are themselves a kind of technology that we are using to benefit in healthcare. Right? So fine, work on that, but call it what it is, right? So is this an image processing system that highlights areas of concern for radiologists to look at? And there's probably a shorter way to say that. But if you call it AI, then it gets mixed up with the ChatGPTs. And I certainly don't want my radiologist asking ChatGPT about my healthcare, right?
Yeah, and I think that's precisely right. And I think there's an idea that a single system can do all these different things. And so OpenAI has made it such that, and many of these different companies have made it such that you can upload an image, it can do some kind of analysis of the image, depending on what they're doing, but it's intended to be this really poorly scoped technology to do all these different things. There are interesting, there was some really interesting work. I was recently at the big sociology conference. This is called the American Sociological Association, and a few different sociologists had talked about radiology specifically. And radiology is this kind of, I think it's of FDA approvals in technology, radiology I think has the highest number of approvals in terms of things that kind of get lumped into AI specifically. But those technologies are often either they do things like pattern assistance and detection, or they do things like draw boundaries for radiation treatments. And one of the studies was very interesting because some of the clinicians kind of reject those technologies, not because they're necessarily inaccurate, but because there's a certain kind of professional discretion that's helpful in those actually the kind of drawing of where radiation should be. And there's a really interesting paper by someone whose first name I remember, but I apologize, Shira, and they're at Harvard in sociology. Go to their graduate student page. And so that was a really interesting kind of development. And I think it's what happens when your friend posting this to Facebook. I think there is a lot of this thing about calling everything AI. It is one thing, it is a kind of gambit to get part of that VC pie, and that VC is going to a small set of companies. It is much less sexy to say, I'm going to a company doing large-scale pattern recognition on breast cancer imagery, right, or radiology. And the second element of that in technological change, and this has been something I think has been emphasized a lot by labor economists in this field, these professions are not replaced whole cloth. Jeff Hinton, who I mentioned earlier, said at some point that, in 5 years, we're not, there's a great image, there was a great meme where Jeff Hinton said, we're not going to have radiologists in 5 years. Meanwhile, I think the number of radiologists has actually gone up. And there's a meme format where it says, Jeff Hinton says there's not going to be radiologists in 5 years, and then Elon Musk says they're not going to be human drivers in 5 years, and then the third image is, here's all the radiologists driving to work in their cars. Right. And so these are things that are overpromised in terms of whole cloth replacement. And yes, they're augmenting activity, but let's be very specific about what the technology is doing, which tasks are being replaced, and also who's being consulted about if those are useful or not.
So maybe if we can just pause here, what I'm hearing is be very wary of the consumer-grade chatbots that are showing up at every place we turn, at least when we're in our online lives. Secondly, that there might be appropriate user cases for this technology or for specific elements of this technology. And if done properly, maybe so, and we can be open to that. What about the idea that this is going to take away all of our jobs or replace a bunch of workers or lead even to a human extinction level event? which
Okay,
are,
so multiple claims here.
How about you do the jobs and I do the
Yeah, I'll
extra
do the
rest?
jobs and you do the extinction. All right, so is this? I'm assuming this is a family-friendly venue, so I won't curse. So in the book, we say, AI is not going to take your job, but it will make your job crappier. Okay, and that's through a few different. Through a few different mechanisms. One, there's going to be a justification that, and here I'm going to say large language models because I think that is where much of the enthusiasm in job replacement is being focused. There is kind of this excitement to replace things that are doing work effectively with text and people who are doing work with text to be replaced whole cloth. So there is not a technology that I think, or a role that has been replaced whole cloth in like the history of the Bureau of Labor Statistics. The only one is elevator operator. And this is a thing that I forgot the labor economist's name, but it makes this claim and kind of analysis of the BLS. And so what typically happens in particular areas in automation is that particular tasks may be replaced or supplemented with new tasks. So this is a kind of a process of replacement. When we talk about language models, what we're seeing is less of this necessarily replacement of positions when there are layoffs that are attributed to language models. There's not proof that those jobs are actually being replaced. Those are often pushes from companies saying that we replaced, this many jobs with with LLMs. Typically, it's just they want to lay off those people anyways, and that they were using language models as an excuse to do that. In those cases where they need to then shore up those tasks that are not done, those are either laid on other people through a process of labor intensification, or they're outsourced to something to a different locale. A good example of this is in the healthcare setting is medical transcription. Medical transcription used to be a much more prevalent position. What happened to medical transcription jobs is that they turned into remote jobs in which there's kind of like a Zoom call or something in the room, and there's someone that is typically in the majority world, very often in the Philippines, who's doing that transcription over a call, and then there's a desire to then replace that position with an automatic speech recognition tool. And there was a reporting that was done by Garen Spurk at the AP, where OpenAI's Whisper tool made up so much of the text that's in that transcription. So the kind of case in which there's a notion that there will be a wholesale replacement of positions is really very much a line that serves many people in the C-suite, many executives. Unfortunately, this is also a line that's being parroted by people like Bernie Sanders. His office last week put out an awful report in which they said 100 million jobs would be replaced by AI, including 89% of fast food workers, which to me, and here's the kicker, they did that analysis with ChatGPT. So take those claims with a major grain of salt.
Okay. So Emily, the California legislature just passed and the governor signed an AI safety bill. Similar bill passed in New York this year, hasn't been signed yet, that is addressing this concern about a potential extinction level or mass casualty event that AI, there it is again, could actually, in the wrong hands, unleash a chemical, biological, nuclear attack of some sort. Is this something that our policymakers should be spending time on and trying to guard against?
I really wish not. I think there's a lot of actual harms in the here and now that I wish there was attention on. Before I get to that, I want to back up a little bit and say that there are certainly use cases for automation. A lot of the use cases, as Alex was saying, is actually displacing work to other people. And the automation is basically making the work of poorly paid people accessible in a way that allows C-suite folks to reduce jobs. I don't see any beneficial use cases of synthetic text and that particular technology. So when we have, this is going to be personalized tutoring, or this is going to be AI therapist, all of those are disastrous and I think shouldn't be done. To the existential risk question, this is the idea that another one of our terms for these systems is racist pile of linear algebra. Right? The idea is if you put enough computer chips in there and you put enough training data in, it's going to somehow combust into consciousness, and then it's not going to like the people that made it, and it's going to kill us all somehow.
We've seen that movie.
Yes, and it's one story that is repeated over and over again, and it's this not super entertaining, sort of fiction. And I'm a speculative fiction fan. Yeah, the AI 2027
Like
document.
the first one was maybe like 2001: Space Odyssey. Maybe the first time it was
that was
done,
a weird movie.
Yeah. To be frank, I've actually never. I haven't seen a surprising number of these movies.
I'd say you have to watch it, but it is hard to stay awake.
I'll do it.
So anyway, there's this idea, and it comes from this school of thought called long-termism. And if you start looking at the various sort of recitations of it, you can see these same familiar beats. They're effectively writing fan fiction. And fan fiction is fine if you keep in mind that it's fiction. But these people are doing it straight-faced. They think they are seeing the future. And how could we have large-scale harm coming out of these systems? Well, sometimes the more sensible-sounding things are, what if you hooked it up to automatic trading and you took down the stock market? Or what if you hooked it up to something that was drawing a lot of power from the grid and the electrical grid crashed? Or what if you just needed a lot of energy to train the thing and the electrical grid crashed? Like, these are real-world problems that can happen, but they're either to do with massive resource usage, that is a decision that people make, or they are about effectively hooking up the magic 8-ball to something that's making consequential decisions, and that decision to hook it up is a decision that people make. The risk of the system itself deciding to do something is silly science fiction that I would rather policymakers did not spend time on.
Just lastly on that, what if a bad actor wanted to misuse the frontier model to unleash some sort of catastrophic harm? Is that a more realistic scenario? Because again, that is being legislated against right now.
Yeah.
I'm not making this up.
Right. No, I know. I just want to pause for a moment on the phrase frontier model. First of all, for sort of the colonialist ideas behind that phrasing. And secondly, there's this idea that the bigger the models, the more, in quotes, capable, and we have to be worried about like the leading edge of these models as they get bigger and bigger. What could a bad actor do? One of the scenarios that sometimes spun out is that these models, because they have ingested so much information, they become therefore a shortcut to learning how to make a bioweapon. And if that information's in the model, it's because it was already out there on the open internet somehow.
Okay.
I would also say that if a bad actor is going to get in trouble for making a bioweapon, shouldn't they be persecuted for the bioweapon? I mean, is the language model the elements of that is really the thing that needs to be legislated against? And I should just say, just because we talked about this California bill, the California bill is very bad. I mean, it is SB 53 basically addressing very little of the actual harms involved in things that are called artificial intelligence, the things that are related to the degradation of our social services, the way in which automation has been made to replace so many different things. There was a thing that I just saw some reporting on today so first off, I live in California. I just flew in today, and my arm's tired. Sorry, I couldn't help myself. But Gavin Newsom had said kind of initially that he wanted to use artificial intelligence to do things around homelessness and traffic. What has been done in California, so around homelessness had been done with bed allocation, which bed allocation has little to do with LLMs. The one LLM usage that had been deployed in California by Daniel Lurie, the mayor of San Francisco, and his Office of Innovation, was a chatbot to help people who lived in RVs navigate upcoming regulation on like where they could park without being fined. But these systems themselves have given out really terrible information, conflicting information that is not deterministic. That means gives different results each time. There's an article that Mission Local did on this. And so that is a place that's very consequential for some of the most marginalized people in our society, and yet it is giving them the wrong information and putting them in even more administrative danger.
And this is a theme throughout the book, which is the idea that there's an AI solution for everything, and be wary before you adopt it, whether it's in your personal life or your professional life. We do need to get to audience questions. I've got several on the pad here, and we've got the mics here. So if you'd like to ask a question, or a mic, make your way to the mic, and I'm gonna ask the first question on the iPad. How do we combat AI, in quotes, use by professionals that we employ, like doctors, freelance artists, or tech support teams? So we can choose in our own personal lives how to interact, but what about all of the people we interact with who are using it?
I think it depends a lot on the scenario. So if you are hiring an artist to do something, you can say, it is my condition to be paying you to do this work, that it is your work and you're not using a synthetic image. If you go to the doctor's office, hopefully there should be some consent forms. And you can say, I do not consent to have ambient listening on, recording everything I say to you. If it is tech support, I guess it depends on your relationship to tech support. That's a bit harder. The best thing might be to say, hey, I support you in not using that thing.
Okay. Go ahead. And maybe introduce yourself and ask your question.
Yes. Hello, my name is Patrick. I actually, unfortunately, work in big tech. So I have a question, and bear with me while I try to quickly set the stage. So we've talked a lot tonight about AI capabilities and what it can't do. But let's think about self-driving cars and how there wasn't really a vote of the people before those got deployed on the road. Recently, I just decided to boycott Spotify because the CEO is an investor of AI militarized drone technology, which, as an example, let's say we'll find an area of land and decide that we need to deploy a strike there. And perhaps that's part of an automation. So in the part of your book or the idea of create the future we want, there is this element of intent and motive that AI doesn't have, but those behind the chatbot may. And so how do we create the future that we want when there can be bad actors who can skate being bad because there's no legislative consequence for what they're doing?
Thank you.
Yeah, okay, so there's a lot there, and sorry for working big tech. I mean, I used to as well. Yeah, I mean, I think there's elements of this where, like, some of these need policy solutions, and unfortunately, the policy environment is very difficult to navigate, both on a national level and on a state level. I mean, the state legislators are also being heavily lobbied to create legislation that's very friendly to the industry. I think the idea of developing different technology that works for people and to which people can accede to has to do with getting more people involved in developing alternative tools. And so thinking about some of the more robust institutions that we have for doing that, what are these institutions? Well, there often are, our unions, sometimes our community groups, our civil society, and many of these organizations are well situated to then present different alternatives to what it can be. And so one great example I want to mention, I was at a tech labor conference this past weekend, and the New York Times Tech Guild, which runs all the technology at the New York Times. They have a very strong union, and they were developing internal tools for organizing, but also things that people could agree to being involved with. And that was itself is kind of pro-social technological development, and we're seeing a lot of those being developed in different kinds of co-ops and different kind of tech collectives. So I think that's very oppositional to how this is being developed, whether it's Waymo's or ChatGPT, because most of these technologies aren't really developed with a pro-social orientation in mind. It's more focused on these elements of power centralization and focusing on a few actors controlling so many different resources. And just being in Seattle, we can see that with the AWS outage yesterday. Half of the internet went down because Amazon controls half the internet services.
Another audience question, we'll come back to the mic in just a second, is about how to combat the bias in the models. You've talked about the environmental costs. There's also the low cost labor that's being used, much of it overseas, to do a lot of the grunt work of building these models. How do you, again, people are asking, what steps can I take to push back against some of that?
Yeah, so I think there's two questions here. One is what to do about the fact that these models trained on existing data are going to reflect the biases in that data. And the other is because the data, especially because the data has been collected just willy-nilly, Alex likes to say they grabbed everything that wasn't nailed down on the internet. And if you think about what's not nailed down on the internet, it's a lot of really awful stuff. And so in order to keep things like ChatGPT and Midjourney and all that from outputting just horrific things, there is some data janitorial work that people have to look at the horrific things and label it, and all of that is being outsourced to very impoverished workers who are suffering quite a bit. So what can you do about that as an individual? Well, again, don't use these systems. Don't motivate the training of the next one. And I think also it is difficult. So the bias question is real, and I think that we are never actually going to be able to build unbiased models in general. The very best we can hope for is to build special purpose, smaller scale things where we know what's gone into it in the training data and we know where it's going to be used, and so we can test for the various possible harms that might come up.
And I just wanted a very small addendum. There's no such thing as an unbiased model. There's always a bias towards what we want. And we see that where I think even Anthropic, which is supposed to be the quote unquote good one, is said something like they wouldn't have outputs that were woke. And so, okay, what does that mean? You're really exposing that you have to have some kind of value orientation.
Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Diego. And the other side of things, I'm in a tech startup, and I'm sorry for this as well. But I have a love for data science, mathematics, and I train in sociology. And I want to have pro-social impact with the work that we're doing in the AI startup. But I'm afraid I'm working within the system of the economy that's forcing me to do things that are going to have the negative environmental impacts, or that have some bias that I'm not sure how to train against. So do you have any advice, any first principles I can do as I'm building these systems in a way that I want to have that positive impact?
So one thing that I do with my students every year, and if we have any students in the room, we'll get to this probably in spring quarter, is we do a session on whistleblowing. And part of the thing is to think before the moment comes of what are the red lines that I'm unwilling to cross? So what are the things that I'm unwilling to do? And then what are the things where not only would I not participate, but I would feel compelled to whistleblow? And that's a very personal decision, not least because for some people, your job is attached to your ability to remain where you live. And for many reasons, including visa status and so on. But to think about those things ahead of time can be very helpful. And then the other lesson that comes out of that is find your people, find the networking, find the people that you can talk to when you're getting worried, so that should that arise, you've got that network built already.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Next question.
Hi, thank you all. I'm not in the tech industry. I'm an attorney. I represent workers, and I'm cognizant of what you just said about Bernie Sanders, the scaremongering, what you would call, I guess, scaremongering around job loss, is something that I guess I have been doing a little bit of just feeling the angst of gosh, what's going to happen? Is work going to exist? Is employment going to exist? Is there a purpose for, having these laws? So question is, what do you propose? So are you saying that to speculate about the possibility of job loss is itself feeding the hype, and so we shouldn't do that?
Let me be very clear. There is worker displacement happening. It's not, there are positions in which, like people are getting laid off, and I don't want to minimize that. I will say that people are not getting laid off due to this technology being able to replace what they're doing. So those worker displacement is happening because of decisions from C-suites and executives. And that is something we should fight against. We should fight for good jobs. We should fight for work and dignity. Yeah, and
just follow up. So
Yeah.
you're saying it's not that the AI is actually going to replace their labor. Effectively, it's just a marketing tool to sell their job replacement.
Yes.
But in effect, it's the same thing essentially to me. So I'm just like,
it's
right? Because it's
well-
ultimately you're getting replaced by either an actual thing that's going to do the thing or we wanted to keep it PG crappier version of, the thing. So like effectively it is lost.
I'm going to have Alex answer, and then we got
It is important to distinguish this because it is important to distinguish how we fight this. And because you can say, if it is actually replacing labor, then maybe I should believe Sam Altman and say, let's invest, because I too would love a fully automated luxury communist, like in something with like a UBI and the kind of largesse of these companies to go to everybody. But that's not what's happening. It is intensifying the jobs that exist right now. And and what I think LLMs are is that they're an anti-worker technology. And so if that then shifts political targets and the kind of targets of where we're looking, not just on, like in a particular sort of centralization in a certain way that we think about who controls what technology is. So I think it helps what the fight is and what it's against. And we can also, and sorry, I'm getting glares from us.
Yeah, well, we are unfortunately at time. And I do want to wrap up. But I want to wrap up because I think takeaways are important. So thank you for the questions. Thank you to those who are standing in line. Perhaps you can grab the authors afterwards for a one-on-one chat. But I think a good way to end this is in the book you have a list of questions that we all should be asking to sort of interrogate this, right? So arm us with some questions we should ask as we head out the door and into this brave new world we're in, and then we'll let you sign some books. Sell and sign some books.
Excellent. So if someone is proposing to automate something, the questions you should be asking are, what's being automated here? What's the input? What's the output? Is that sensible, right? Could you reasonably get to that output from that input? If the input is audio signal and the output is words, yeah, probably. If the input is a picture of someone's face and the output is yes or no, is this person a criminal? No, right? But all of these things are going to be sold. So you can ask that question. You can ask, who's benefiting from automating this? Whose labor was involved in the production of the automated system and how are they treated, right? What's going to happen if the automation is in place and it fails? Do we have sufficient resources in place for people to have recourse? Have we set up appropriate accountability and so on? And the reason that all of this is phrased in terms of automation is that I think it makes it much easier to ask those questions if we take out the magic fairy dust of AI.
One of the other questions is it being described as, is there anthropomorphizing happening? Is it being described as an AI tutor or an AI teacher? And that helps us say that there's a certain kind of work that is anticipated that it can be replacing. How is that being described? And what actual work is not getting done there? And teachers do much more than give you questions. They develop relationships with you. They are invested in your well-being as a student. And what does that do to serve what's happening behind the scenes?
Please join me in thanking Alex Hanna and Emily Bender. They will be signing books right over here afterwards, so stick around for that. Oh, they moved. It's over there now. Somewhere in this room. So please stick around for that. Thank you, everybody.